You wanted to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brandflex here, back with another Eternal Return video. For today's video, we'll be going through the patch 1.5 notes. Noble gave them to us pretty early this time, which is pretty nice. They're on Korean Thanksgiving, so that's why they're here very early this week. So jumping right into it, we are starting with these special box bundles. These are skins from the previous battle passes that you guys wouldn't have access to if you started after the release. So just giving more accessibility to them. It's pretty nice. Going further to the actual setting improvements, we do have auto accept now in the game. So if you go off to the restroom or you want to get a glass of water, you can now enable auto accept in the broadcast mode of settings, which is pretty nice. Just be aware that there might be some dodging issues if you consistently AFK during these accepts. Skipping a few things, we're going right to the escape portion. They're updating escape so that you can only escape under certain conditions, or you can't escape under certain conditions. So if there's two teams left, if someone's already escaped, and there's already teams fighting in the abandoned dock, you can't buy the root kit. And if your entire team is alive, you can't buy root kit either, which will prevent people from griefing. Obviously, if there's one person dead, you can still grief with a root kit, so they'll be trying to fix that with escape voting later on. Jumping a bit further, we do have a note about the replays. The replays have obviously been super broken, so hopefully they fix them soon. Praying on that. We'll see. So going into the actual content of the patch, we do have Nadine to start us off. Nadine crossbow has been super dominant, so she's getting a overall 0.5 attack power nerf per level, and her base weapon is being nerfed further down. Honestly, a pretty nonsensical nerf because she's super strong. They could probably nerf her more, whatever. Amp Nadine is being buffed in compensation just because Amp Nadine is pretty weak comparatively. So 25% more scaling on her W, not bad. Nathapon E is getting a pretty big buff. This does mean that if you're a Nathapon player, you do have to relearn how to use the combo out of his ultimate because your E does go that much faster. This is really helpful though out of vision. Daniel is getting a 0.5 meter nerf on his dash, which makes his ratting and engage a lot worse. Pretty good nerf for a character that's insanely good at ratting. Debbie and Marlene are getting a pretty big buff to their E. -1 second does matter a lot because you can't reduce this with your cooldown reduction, but her passive does reduce this cooldown by a flat amount, so this might be up a lot more often than you think, and we'll see if she's in a good place after that. Tia is getting buffed once again. Her healing on her red and blue combination is getting increased by a pretty good amount, and her Qs will do more damage overall. This will probably push her into a better place, but I think the reason why she has low average damage is because her abilities are hard to hit, not because her abilities don't do damage. So we'll see once better Tias get a hang of her how well she does in the meta overall in the Western servers. Laura is getting a very big buff, probably one of the biggest buffs of the patch, even though I think she's really strong. So the targeting time for her W, what that means is the kind of maturation period of her W. Once you hit it, it doesn't do anything for a few seconds, and then once it pops, you can ult off of it or you get defense reduction on it. So they're having the amount of time for that. 2 to 1 seconds is really big, especially if you're in a messy fight. They are nerfing her with 40 whole damage off her level 3 ultimate. Nothing really big. We'll see though. I don't know if Laura is really that strong. I know she shows up in Korea, so they'll probably hotfix nerf her if she has a problem. Dailin is getting kind of a rework slightly. Basically, her auto attacks will be a lot weaker because her attack power is going down for nunchucks, going up for gloves though, and her E will do a lot more damage if you hit it because it's off her attack power. Plus 10% is a really big buff, and this basically means that if you're playing nunchuck Dailin, as long as you hit your E, you won't really notice the damage loss, but if you're playing glove Dailin, you'll always feel that damage gain. So kind of an interesting rework for a character that wasn't performing poorly at all. I think she's actually quite good right now. Mai is getting a nerf because she's overperforming. -5 HP per level makes her a bit squishier throughout the game, and her E being a +2 second cooldown makes her a lot less mobile during fights and when she's trying to run away or engage. She is also getting a mage exclusive chest piece, so she won't be as much deadweight if you're running double mage on her. And this also means she has a chest for herself because I think she scales off amp, so a nice little bonus for her as well. Not that you'll build it because you're probably locked to Blazing Dress. Markus is getting hammer buff, which is absolutely useless because nobody wants to play hammer, and his Q is getting a mild rework. Essentially all this means is that you'll do the same amount of healing against anyone with 100 armor. If they have lower than 100 armor, you'll get more healing, and if they have above 100 armor, you'll have less healing. That's all this means for the most part. Magnus is getting buffed a little bit overall, but they're obviously meaning to directly buff that Magnus, which maxes E first, which is the auto attack version. Hammer Magnus will enjoy these buffs the longer the game goes on, but I think Magnus is considered weak in Korea, which is why he's getting more tuned up. Xiukai is getting a bit of a give and take. His dagger mastery is being nerfed a tiny bit because they think dagger's too good, but his ultimate is going to slow and combo into itself more consistently. This will help your ultimate kind of keep people in it, and also if people leave it at the last second, they'll be slowed for a tiny bit longer so you can catch up a tiny bit better. Suwa, hammer, getting a buff again. Who cares? This is so irrelevant. I don't know why they keep doing this. And Adela is getting kind of a damage shift. This is definitely overall a buff in terms of pure numbers, if what they're saying is true, because it sounds like her damage was lower because of a bug, but now they're buffing her skill amp on everything, which means that even though the base damage is being reduced, if you have 400 amp, which is going to be what you get from a base build, you'll do more damage overall, period. So this should be a buff for Adela if I'm reading it right, but obviously if the bug they're talking about was a damage increase, this is a harsh nerf. So we'll see. If you're an Adela player, let me know if it feels good or not. Otherwise, we really don't have any idea based off the text alone. Adriana is being buffed a pretty solid amount. Plus 4% damage reduction is actually bigger than you would expect because that's like 2/3 of stopping power, which is an entire sub augment. So I don't think she needed this, but she was being underplayed, so we'll see where she goes from that. Arda gets a whole wall of text. Basically, all this means is that his passive healing will come up faster when you hit all 3 stacks, and his Q will do a little bit more damage, and his E will do a lot more damage once you max it. Honestly, not a big deal because Arda's E isn't maxed first, so you only feel this late game, and his Q getting 10% more amp is a decent buff, but nothing that will compete with actual mages at the moment, actual meta mages rather. Abigail is getting a decent buff, being a bit more tanky, and also getting her passive toned up a bit. Probably not enough to move her out of kind of her middling tier at the moment. She's probably still decent. I'm pretty sure you can still succeed just fine, but obviously playing other assassins will probably serve you a little bit better. Aya, pistol, again getting a bit of a buff, plus 5% amp is always decent on an ability that hits multiple times, but I don't think she's that great still, but she is pretty fun, so if you want to play pistol Aya, you're in good hands. Isol is once again subjected to a bunch of random changes that will benefit both AR and pistol Isol. Obviously the HP per level benefits both sides, and the Q benefits pistol Isol more because you max at second, and then W, the SP cost overall just make him a lot more easier to manage. His ultimate is getting a much shorter cooldown late game, which is a little scary, especially with 30% CDR. You can cast it like every 11 seconds. We'll see where that actually takes him. I'm not sure what the point of it is. Isol's bombs didn't do much damage, but I guess the zone control being replenished will make him do more damage overall. Isaac is getting the biggest buff of the patch, period. His passive is being reduced by 1 in terms of stack amounts to trigger it, which is really important because it opens up a lot more combo potential for him. And his ultimate is getting the tiniest nerf because they're reworking it to account for those lower passive stacks. So I'll probably be playing Isaac a lot myself through the patch to see how he does, but I think this makes him good as long as there's not a Sua in your lobby, so pretty good showing for Isaac players. Alex is getting a much needed nerf to his passive, which would activate whenever he pressed E. He's a super good rat, and I'm surprised it's still this high. It could go lower in my opinion. And Johann is getting a footnote because they're increasing the AP on all gloves. Estelle is getting a Q buff, which looks pretty big on paper, but I think you maxed Q last, so it's only a buff to very late game Estelle. You do get a little bit more damage because of the scaling buff, but nothing that great. Echion is getting a slight defense tone up, which is scary because Black Mamba does a lot of damage. We'll see where he goes. I'm always scared of Echion buffs. Elena is getting a nerf again to her inner ult damage, which is always very weird because I feel like if you care about Elena ult damage, or if you care about Elena damage, you could always nerf the other parts of her kit. Kind of odd, but it is what it is. Emma is getting a tiny buff to her Shuriken mastery because it's less play than Arcana. They need to stop doing that. I don't know why they keep doing that. Johann is getting a pretty good buff to his Q, and all his SP costs are dropping, and his ultimate, if you didn't know, did some damage, does more now. So pretty good buffs for Johann overall. I don't know if they make him good, but he will be a little bit better to play. Irem is getting a bit of a damage buff to her E. I actually did not know that her E had a damaging hitbox, but if you do hit it, you do more damage, and it goes a bit further, which makes her ratting and engage a lot better now. 11 is probably the most powerful tank at the moment. She is getting a very slight nerf to her ultimate. A lot more noticeable early game, but this will make her a bit squishier if you're trying to burst her down and she pops her R. Zahir is also getting a kind of usability buff with his E costing less. It won't really change his power level, it's just to make him friendlier to play for newer players. Jackie is getting kind of a buff overall. I think this buffs all of Jackie, even though they claim that they're trying to keep two-hand sword as is. Like, this is just a flat buff to everything, right? So dagger and dual swords are getting mastery buffs, and two-hand sword is getting a very small mastery nerf. But her W is going to last way longer. The movement speed is going to be nerfed a little bit because of that. But now the kind of threshold to get maximum healing from her W is being increased from 20% to 40%, which means that if Jackie's half HP, she'll be getting a lot of health suddenly. So be careful if you see her going like, let's go, or whatever her voice line is in the other languages. You should probably run away from her for 5 seconds and then engage her after that, because she'll be a lot weaker after her buff is over. Karla is getting a pretty big buff. Readiness is her passive, which enables her auto attack, and that's really scary because she can now get her passive back within one pullback. So this should make her a lot stronger if you're good with aiming her W and Qs. We'll see where she is after this. Cathy is getting a pretty solid durability nerf. Minus 50 HP overall will matter a lot, but I think Cathy one-shots when she's played properly, so we'll see if that does anything. Chiara is getting a W buff. You can now reuse it more quickly, which means that aggressively it's better, and also being on a short cooldown means you can cast it a lot more often. Theodore getting a W buff is pretty scary because W is his, enabler of his kit. We'll see where he is. I'm pretty sure he's going to be really strong after that, if he's in Korea. And then Priya getting a plus 10% amp scaling to her Q. Always nice because that is her most spammed ability. Fiora is getting an overall damage nerf in exchange for an ultimate damage buff. I think this is overall a nerf to Fiora, which is surprising, but I don't like Fiora that much. I think people do. I'm not really sure what the point of this is. I think if you hit everything, she does the exact same damage. So, again, not sure what they're doing. I don't think she was that strong, so don't know why they're nerfing her. Haze is getting a damage rework. Her Q in her base form is doing a lot more damage, and her ultimate is going to do a bit less damage, which means that if you're playing her more in melee, you'll get more rewarded, and if you're hitting all of your ultimates, like, in general, you'll do slightly less, but I think it's a good reward because she's more interactive when she is within striking range. Hyunwoo is getting a buff to his Tonfa side, and net neutral to his glove side. Basically, his passive, which would heal him, would do extra damage, and now actually has an amp scaling, which is scary because that thing, Tonfa Hyunwoo, did a lot of damage to begin with, so we'll see what they do with that. Hyejin is getting a usability buff, sorry about that. Basically, her E is going to travel a bit faster, and now you can't spam it by accident. In the past, she did more damage when she recast it, but now she doesn't, so they're just making it less awkward to use. And also, her ultimate is going to do slightly less damage, but you're going to open it up much faster, so hopefully a good buff for Hyejin. I think she's been a bit underplayed. So moving on, we do have the glove changes. Plus 10 to all gloves means that auto attack gloves will be a bit happier. If you auto attack, you do 10 more damage. Not too shabby. And there is a new VF Blood glove, which I think is not terrible, but is really expensive, so we'll see if it gets played. Axe is getting a mini rework where it gets 0.2 more range, so they're reducing the range on all these other axe skills. Santa Muerte is being nerfed, Juggernaut is being reworked so that it's more usable, I guess, in general. And Pangu is getting buffed, which is the Tenacity AP stack axe. Crossbow, one change, it's the Crossbow Nadine crossbow, so a bit weaker, but still pretty strong. Nunchucks, amp, these are all Piolo buffs. Piolo didn't show up in the patch notes, so they're kind of hiding those buffs in the weapon changes, which is really weird. Don't think it's that great. Tonfa, Plasma Tonfa is a Isaac weapon, which is pretty important because this is a really big Isaac weapon buff. And then Frozen Echo, which is the upgrade version, is also getting buffed really hard, so they're really pushing to be Isaac to be strong. And Mugi's Pearl and Fireball, which were both terrible upgrades, are being buffed a little bit more, so hopefully they don't feel as bad to build. Another big buff of the patch, Elysian Halo is getting its unique passive reduced by 1 second, which makes it a lot more spammable. This means that in a 10-second fight, you go from 3 procs to 5 procs, which is huge. And here is Mai's chest, just a kind of Holy Order substitute where you get cooldown in exchange for skill amp. And obviously you get that Rabadon's effect where you get the multiplier from the VF, or rather the Force Core component. A bunch of random buffs to the underutilized armor pen items. Blood Ripper, Glacial Crampons, Iron Maiden, Taproots all being buffed a little bit. I think they're still pretty bad, but who knows. And a bunch of random changes. As usual with Cobalt, I'll pause on the bug fixes and the weapon improvements just in case, because again, I don't really know what this change is. This Ava change does buff Meowthin because his Ava R would often bug, but besides that, if you have something you see that interests you, please let me know, because again, I am really bad at knowing what exactly is changing where. With all that said, I hope you guys enjoy this patch. It'll be out hopefully soon when this video is released, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.